Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. It's about time because I've gotten quite a few new palettes, but I'm finally getting around to ranking all of my Natasha Denona palettes because I've recently picked up some new ones and I've been playing with some, I've been experimenting with some, so it's about time, get my thoughts together and rank them from least favorite to favorite. I am just so happy and grateful that I get to have a collection this size. I mean, it's not that long ago that I had to save up for 8 months to buy one Natasha palette. So I don't want this to come across as bragging or anything. This is just some of my favorite shadows in my collection. I do have a large collection now of Natasha shadows, and I thought it would be great to be able to share my thoughts and experiences with you guys so that A, you can kind of make a better informed decision if you finally do want to save up and get a Natasha palette, or B, you just want to see where all my palettes kind of fall now that I've had time to kind of experiment and use them all more. So I've got them all here. They're all already prepped, set up. So let's go ahead and start, of course, from my least favorite, and we'll work my way up to my favorite. I currently have 14 Natasha Denona palettes, which is including mini palettes, full-size palettes, giant palettes, but that does not include my Panda palette from last year, the Lila palette. That is back here, but I did pan it, so it is currently empty. I'm no longer counting it, so it would have been 15 palettes including the Lila, but right now I only have 14 palettes to rank. So since that's quite a lot, let's go ahead and get started. I don't think this one has changed in any of my ranking videos, but it's been my biggest regret. To be very honest with you guys, I should not have bought this palette. I'm glad I'm getting use out of it, but I never should have gotten it. This is the big 28 green brown palette. There's two of these palettes that Natasha has. She has a green brown and she has a blue purple, I believe is the other palette. This is over $200. It's not worth it. No, it is not. I picked this up because this was after I had, I think a big tax return thing, and I wanted to save up and get one big splurge item, and this was not worth it. I got this because at the time there really were no other green palettes from Natasha. Now, and we'll see through the rest of my collection, she's come out with plenty of green, blue-green, green by itself shades, and they're awesome. But at the time, these are really the only green shades that she had. And I love the Natasha formula. I really wanted some green shades, and this was it. I have panned or hit pan in certain shades in here. Just because the spite in me was I need to use this. It's too expensive to declutter. It's I just had to use it. And really spite is the only thing that's keeping me going here. I did rearrange it. I love rearranging my Natasha palettes just because I don't like the way that they originally are laid out. I kind of like seeing them in this kind of rainbow form. But I should not have bought this. If I were to go back and repurchase my palettes, which that could be a video. If you want to know at the end of the day, if I lost all of my palettes, which ones I would buy first, let me know down below. But this would definitely not be on the list. Absolutely not. Don't buy this. All right, coming up next, we have two mini palettes coming in at, I guess if that's 14, this would be 13 and 12. I can't count. But first we have the mini gold palette. This palette, while, again, I got tricked by these greens. They're not really greens. They're kind of greeny browns. They're not really great, is what I'm trying to say. But I missed out on the gold palette when it originally came out, and when the mini gold came out, I was excited because I thought it would be the best shades in the gold palette. Spoiler alert, it is not. This is not a great distillation of the gold palette. It's not a good representation of the gold palette, and it's not even good on its own, just for the shades that are here. It's not that great. Again, this is something that I could, if I could go back in time and skip it, I would. Next, we have a mini version of a palette that I love. Slight spoiler alert for later on. This is the mini Metropolis palette. And my gripe with this is that I don't know why they focus on these neutrals and the golds. The Metropolis palette is this beautiful grungy rainbow, and you chose the most boring shades minus this one blue. Look at this. That's a boring palette. It's a pop effect. It really is the pop effect here, and it's not great. It's the same formula as the Metropolis palette, but if you were wanting the Metropolis palette, this isn't really a good substitute because there are so many great grungy shades in that palette, and here you're getting one good shade and then two browns and two yellow golds, and you can get those in any of our other palettes, or any other palettes to be frank. All right, so next we have a palette that I loved at first, but I have to acknowledge the fact that the quality is significantly different from the rest of her palettes. And I don't know if maybe it's just because of the color scheme, or I don't know. It's the Pastel palette. Yeah, I really like the shades. I can get some pretty looks out of some of these shades here, but some of these like are so powdery, you really have to build up. It's mainly like this top row right here, these pastels. They're so light. And I'm Casper. They're light. You can barely see them on my complexion. I have no idea how they're going to show up on anyone of a deeper complexion. So these are just meh. My favorite shades are this bottom row just because they're very rich, they're very pigmented, but this top row, the fact that basically a third of the palette is not unworkable. You can get looks out of this, but it's definitely a lot more effort than any other Natasha palette that you're gonna find. So I was really hype about this color story at first, and while I can still use it, it's not like the best of the best from Natasha. All right, next we have another mini. This is the mini retro palette, and this one's this far down because it's not really a great representation of the retro palette. Like the not large, but the midi-sized retro palette is actually really good, and I really like it for different reasons. But this, again, like looking at this versus the midi-sized retro, it's not a good distillation of it, which is kind of weird. Like, you think if you would have a midi and a mini palette and they had the same name, you would kind of want them to be similar. But with quite a few of these mini palettes, it seems like Natasha kind of wanted the minis to be their own thing. But in that case, don't name them the mini blah 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 when it's nothing like the blah 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 palette. Right? Right. Anyway. That aside, this on its own, it's actually a cute palette by itself. It's just very different from the retro palette. So while it's not the worst, it's not the best. Next, this one I actually like. Now we're getting into the palettes that I like, but not as much as the other palettes, right? So this is the Mini Love palette, and I actually did pick this up instead of the Midi Love palette. I do think this is actually a good distillation of the shades from the Love palette into a mini. See here, you've got like a nice like range of colors, and they all fit that same color story. It's not like 3 neutrals and then like 1 pop of color from the palette, right? It's actually like a light purple, a deep purple, a pink, a light baby pink, and then like a dark pink. Like it's all the same color story. This is nice. This is what I want to see out of like these mini palettes. I also love the packaging, like having it be like the pink packaging, adorable. I like this. I really do. And I'm glad I got this because it did help me like not need the Midi Love palette, because I did have that distillation of it here. And I have to say, I think I say this in every video I talk about Natasha in, but Natasha across the board, her mini palettes are the same quality as her larger palettes, from the big 28 green browns to the regular 129 to the midi palettes to the minis, all the same formula. And I have to say, I do not see that a lot in other higher end brands, because I mean, I've seen luxury brands, higher end brands cheap the heck out when it comes to mini products or holiday products. You don't see that with Natasha. Actually, one of my favorite products was a holiday release from them, which is pretty rare because brands tend to cheap out for the holiday stuff. But I want to say, across the board, while the minis might not be exactly what I was looking for, they are still amazing quality. And honestly, if the minis had been out when I first got into makeup and first started buying from Natasha, I would have mainly minis. Minis and midis. All right, next we have a very sentimental palette. Like I mentioned before, this is the Sunset palette. This was her first palette of this size. It was her first 129 palette. Before this, she only had the big 28 pan palettes. And then I think she had the Star palette. And then she came out with this. And this broke the internet. This was just like, it's hard to tell just how big of a splash this made back in the day. And I saved up for 8 months. This came out, I want to say it was like either late one year or early the next. And I waited and saved up until the November of the next year to buy this. Which for me, that was a long time. I guess the longest I've had to save up just like for a makeup item in order to get it. So this, I had so much fun with this. I'm actually panning a palette that's considered a dupe for this, because I thought about panning this, but I just did Leela. I had fun with Leela, but it's a little too sentimental to me for now. I do like these shades. I have to say, it's not my favorite color story from Natasha. We've got like the other half of my palettes down here that I do rank higher than this one. But this one is where it is because it is very good quality and it's very sentimental. I have to say, I don't really reach for like this warm tone of a look anymore, which is kind of crazy because I am panning a warm tone look. I like to challenge myself when I pan, but I don't think I will ever get rid of this palette. because it is so sentimental to me, because it had that place in my makeup history. And it's legitimately, like, it's a good palette. I'm kind of shocked I have not rearranged this yet. I think I should. I think this and I think the gold palette, once we get to it, are the two palettes I want to go ahead and just pop the shades out and rearrange. And I'm surprised I haven't done so already. All right, next we have a midi palette. I really wish these midi palettes had been out, again, when I first got into makeup and first got into Natasha Denona, because the midis are really the best of both worlds. You get like a large color story, you get a nice varied palette, you get really nice packaging, and it's only $65 compared to the 120 or the two somethings or the whatevers. So this is the Sunrise palette, and this to me was kind of like the glow up from the Sunset palette. So I do like this a little bit more just because I am drawn towards this color story and this packaging a bit more. This packaging is a lot easier to keep clean than this kind of, I don't even know what to call this kind of packaging, but inside it's like black and squishy, and this stains a lot easier, and it is a pain in the butt. Like, I spent a year panning a palette in this packaging, and it was a pain in the butt to keep clean, I'll tell you that. But this packaging is a bit cleaner. I like the mirror. I like that it stands up on its own like this, so that if you were traveling or if you were just using this as a mirror, it would stay up. So this just puts it just like slightly above the sunset for me, the sunrise. It's really pretty and I really like it. All right, next we have another midi palette, and it's a color story that I was shocked by how much I liked this. This is the retro palette. So this palette, it is just gorgeous. To me, I saw this and I saw like an updated, revamped modern Renaissance here. It is gorgeous. Again, I love this packaging, and also in the back of this packaging there are little holes so you can pop out all the shades. So you can pop the shades out, you can rearrange them if you want, you can pop them into smaller palettes. I do love that about all the Natasha palettes. The majority of them have a way to pop the shades out so you can do with the singles what you want. But I was shocked by how much I liked this color story, because at first it looked a little bit neutral, it looked a little bit kind of bland, but once I got in, started playing with the shades, just wearing them, seeing how they perform on the eye, shocked. And also, my Modern Renaissance went bad. That's one of the only palettes that I've ever owned. I've got palettes all the way up here. One of the only palettes I've owned where I've actually seen it expire. It did. It totally expired. Could not use it. It went off, smelled bad. So instead of getting Modern Renaissance again, because I don't really want to support ABH, not after the shit that they've been pulling. So I was happy to have something better, even better, from Natasha. Next, we have another slightly sentimental palette for me. This was actually a gift from my fiance for my birthday last year. This is the Trichrome palette. And this was a palette where I said I wanted it, but this came out right when we were moving. So I knew we weren't going to really have the wiggle room in our budget to pick up a new Natasha palette. And again, I was drawn in by those greens. I love green. I love the duochrome shades in this palette. They're gorgeous. So it was just extra special when my fiance surprised me with this for my birthday. So what he did is he literally went out and like bought this and hid it for months. He remembered that I said, I think I only mentioned once that I wanted this. He remembered, he bought it, he hid it away, and then surprised the heck out of me come my birthday that year. So extra special. Again, I do like this packaging. So this is not a midi. This is just for size reference. This is a midi palette, and this is actually a 129 palette. So this is the same amount of product and size as the Sunset palette, but it's in like that kind of midi packaging with like the metal and the standalone mirror. So I really do prefer this packaging over the other packaging. We are getting into the top 4 now. Coming in at number 4, we have the Circo Loco palette. Now, this is actually the palette that got me so excited for the Pastel palette that we had earlier, because these colors are gorgeous. These are beautiful. They are definitely jewel tone. They're more rich than the pastels. I think it's just harder to make a pastel kind of formula, but these perform so beautifully. And I love the shades here. You've got basically a little bit of everything. You got like a mini kind of rainbow palette here. You got these beautiful blues, some pinks, some purples, oranges, yellow, everything. Just everything that you need. If I could go back and only buy certain palettes, I think this would probably be my one really colorful Natasha palette, just because each and every shadow in here performs beautifully. It really does. Whereas in the Pastel palette, you kind of have some duds. I don't think there is a dud in this palette. It's gorgeous. And I was so like shocked. Like, this was, I think, one of the big releases from Natasha, because before this, she was really coming out with like neutral palettes. Like, they were very warm or very cool kind of neutral palettes. This was just like, bam, here, circus, take it. And I did. and I love it. It's beautiful. Again, I love this packaging, just stunning. Coming in at a hot number 3, we have my newest palette. I'm actually wearing it all over my face today. This is the gold palette. Yeah, Natasha brought back this and the Metropolis palette for a limited time. Excuse how messy this is. Again, this packaging can stain really easily, especially when you just used it. I did just film a full face with the gold palette. If you missed that, I'll throw that video up in the cards. This is a beautiful palette, and I'm glad I got my hands on it. Like, this is probably one of my biggest regrets, was not buying this when it was originally available. The shades are beautiful. I love everything. The only thing is that this has a lot of fallout. Like, compared to the rest of the palettes, this has so much fallout. Like, you can see it actually stained my face a little bit when I was doing my eyes earlier today. But this is beautiful. Like, this is top 3. This is number 3. Love this palette. Moving on to number 2. This is one that surprised me because I did not think this would perform as well, or I would like it as much as I really do. This is the mini Xenon palette. So this was basically Natasha's smoky eye palette. And I got this immediately because it had a matte black in it. And for the longest time, YouTubers, beauty gurus convinced me that the blackest black shadow from Natasha Denona was apparently like the god of all eyeshadows. It was supposed to be like pigmented, amazingly black, spectacular. To be frank, this is just okay. It's a black shadow. It has not changed my life. It has not done my taxes for me. It has not cured world hunger yet. But that's why I got this. Because I thought this black shadow was going to change my life. It didn't, but this gets you a really pretty smoky eye. And that's really all we can ask for from an eyeshadow palette, isn't it? So I love these shades. They're really pretty. It's honestly like, it's a perfect like little quint, all that you need for like a really pretty smoky eye. Bam, 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 you're out the door. And I didn't include the blackest black shadow because this is a single shadow and not a palette, but again, it's like just okay. And when you're charging nearly $30 for a single eyeshadow, Natasha, all right, I don't think this is going to be a huge surprise if you've been around my channel, but coming in at number 1, my favorite Natasha palette is the Metropolis palette. Can you believe this was a holiday palette? I love the heck out of this palette. This is such a good palette. It should have been permanent. Unfortunately, I think it is now unavailable again. It was brought back for a limited time a few weeks ago, but this palette is beautiful. It is the grungy rainbow of my dreams. I love that she made the shades smaller to give you a bigger variety of shades. There is some overlap. Like, I don't think we needed every neutral in this shade, in this row, but it's so pretty. And I rearranged mine to be the grungy rainbow, but I really like it. Every shade in here is beautiful. I love the dark grungy ones down here. This row of like red and orange is super pretty. These shimmers, while they look kind of plain in the pan, once you swatch them out, they are stunning. These are beautiful. I love this palette so much. And you know, this has really held up through the years. I have done quite a few of these ranking videos, and I think out of most of them, this has been number 1. Ever since I've gotten it, at least. And this was a holiday like release. For most other brands, they skimp out on their holiday palettes. There's a significant dip in quality. You can tell it's not that great. They kind of fade into oblivion after a few years. But this, wow. I am just shocked with the quality. I'm shocked with how much I like it. The only thing, like, to me, this is like a 99 out of 100. What really would have made it that full 100 out of 100 would have been to put it in the different packaging. Like, if this had been in like this kind of hard shell packaging, this would be like my ideal 100% perfect palette. So once again, this Metropolis palette takes the crown for my favorite Natasha palette of all time. So that is it. Those are all of my Natasha Denona palettes ranked. Once again, let me know down below what's your favorite Natasha palette, and I cannot wait to see you in my next video. Bye.